kick off just a two-part series today called Losing My Religion. And I certainly don't mean to offend anyone today, and especially our television audience. My intent is not to offend anyone of different faiths or anything like that, but God has really just dropped a word in my heart, and I need to get it out. If you have your Bibles, you can go to Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10. I'm going to get there in just a second. But did you know this? Did you know that right now there are currently 28 religious wars going on in our world? 28 religious wars happening right now as we speak. I want to just give you a few details, not of the 28 current religious wars going on right now, but probably a few of the more famous ones or famous religious attacks that you've heard of. The Crusades. How many of you have heard of the Crusades? Back in 1095 that lasted for almost 200 years. The first crusade was launched in 1095 with the battle cry of Dovu. That means God wills it. It was a mandate to destroy infidels in the Holy Land, thousands of whom were dragged from their homes or hiding places and hacked to death or burned alive in the name of God. The religious legions plundered their way 2,000 miles to Jerusalem, where they killed virtually every inhabitant, quote, purifying the symbolic city. Over 1.5 million deaths occurred. You might have heard of the 30 years of Holy War, 1618 through 48, during the time of the Reformation. It was one of the most bloody conflicts in Europe ever. Many things done in the name of religion and in the name of God. It finally came to an end in 1648. About 7.5 million people were killed. The Holy Roman Empire was involved in all of these wars, and finally at the end, it was decided that everyone could have their own religion. More recently, 1984, Shiite fanatics who killed and tortured Americans on a hijacked Kuwaiti airliner in Tehran said they did it not only for the will of God, but for the pleasure of God. On Tuesday, September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda terrorists, fundamental Islamic jihadists, hijacked 4 commercial jet airliners. The airliners intentionally crashed into the Twin Towers, 2 of them into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, killing everyone on board. Many of you, of course, or probably everyone around the world is familiar with this. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. The hijacks were staged by Al-Qaeda and their radical leader, Osama bin Laden. They said that they did it in the name of God and in the name of their holy war that they're called by God to do. I don't know about you, but when I read those things and when I look into the 28 religious wars that are currently going on in our world right now, that's enough to make me want to lose my religion. Things done in the name of God. Why is it? Why? What is it about religion? Why are people so passionate? How does it have such a hold on people? You know, I'm not even talking about the different things. Let's talk about the cultic leaders. And many of you are familiar with David Koresh and, of course, Jim Jones and just all the cultic leaders that are able to get people to do things that are just unbelievable. Religion has a very dark side. It has a very negative side. And if I'm just out there, just a person that's not familiar with God and not familiar with religion like I was for at least 20 years of my life, I'm telling you, when I look into that stuff, it's enough to make me just lose my religion and just think that, you know, all this God stuff is just crazy. You know, this week, if you follow me on Twitter, I encourage you to follow me on Twitter. And if you reply to me just there at Stovall Weems, I'll pray for your prayer requests. I obviously can't reply to everyone, but I do read them. I'll pray for your requests. And on Twitter, I sent out a tweet and I said, you know, what comes to your mind when you hear the word religion or when you think of religious people? And I got tons of feedback back. I want to thank many of you for your feedback. And I kind of summarized a lot of them. Listen to these answers. Here's what people tweeted back about religion. Outward forms lacking inward love. Man-made tradition. Rules instead of a relationship with God. Keeping the masses under control. Rules, regulations, conformity, a form of godliness but no power. Joyless. That's what drains the life out of a relationship with God. A lot of you tweeted this. Stuffy, boring, judgmental. I like this one. Man's attempt to define God on his own terms. And this was probably my favorite one right here. I got my tweet pulled up right now. It says, religion. Ladies wearing uncomfortable dresses and pantyhose in the summer because that's what their church tells them they're supposed to do. Somebody call somebody. Man, that was awesome. But I think when we think of religion, here's the interesting, all those things I read to you, outward, stuffy, judgmental, boring, all of those things. You know, Jesus was never described as any of those things. You know, Jesus, when he came, he was the example of love. He showed us God the Father. He specifically said, my kingdom is not of this world. He told Peter, put down your sword. He said, put down those type of things. He said, turn the other cheek. He said, look, don't worry about the earthly kingdoms of this world. If my kingdom was of this world, my angels would come and fight for me. But it's not of this world. Look at that. I looked up the definition of religion in Webster's dictionary. Look at this. Now, it has a lot of things around it, but the very first sentence is this. And I think this really sums it up. Look. And here's the very first word. You want to know what the very first word of the definition of religion is in the dictionary? The outward. Outward. Everybody say outward. Outward. The outward act or form by which men indicate their recognition of the existence of a God or gods having power over their destiny. It is the outward form of some type of expression towards a higher power that people think has control or can control the outcome of their destiny. Jesus did not come to establish an outward form. Jesus came to establish a kingdom that's on the inside of us. He came to establish His rule and His reign in the hearts of men. Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10. Now, before we get there, I know what some of you are thinking. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today, but religion is mentioned in the Bible. It is mentioned in James chapter 1, verse 27, when it talks about that pure and undefiled religion is one who ministers basically, I'm summing it up here, I see it on the screen there, but it's basically someone that ministers to orphans and widows and keeps oneself unspotted from the world. It talks about, but look what James does. The one time that the Bible talks about religion, the first thing he does is he qualifies it. He says pure and undefiled. That means he's assuming that what? Religion is defiled. Those outward forms when you dig on the inside, there is something that's defiling about them. So he says, look, if you want to be religious, you want to know what a pure and undefiled religion is, this is it. It's looking after the widows and the orphans, and it's to keep yourself unspotted from the world. But if you look at that whole chapter 1 in context, you know what James is talking about? He's talking about controlling your tongue.